You can't even be a quiet omega in peace these days. You won't even begin to comprehend what this Alpha King saw when he followed this quiet omega into the woods. That is exactly what we're getting into today. But before we step into the Leakin King's territory, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. It helps our pack grow and ensure you never miss a new release. I want this comment section to be buzzing today. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from? And, while you're listening, timestamp your favorite parts. If a scene makes you laugh or swoon, let me know right when it happens. Are you ready? Let's get into the story. The first time King Elijah saw the magic, it didn't look like a miracle. It looked like an autopsy performed in reverse. He was standing in the shadows of the tree-line, his boots sinking into the semi-frozen muck of the forest floor, watching a girl he had spent 3 years actively ignoring. She was kneeling in the dirt, her hands buried wrist-deep inside the chest cavity of a dying wolf. There was blood everywhere, so much of it that the steam rising from the cooling crimson created a grotesque, iron-scented fog around her. Elijah, a man who had decapitated rogues with a dull blade and not blinked, felt bile rise in his throat. He reached for the silver dagger at his hip, convinced he was witnessing a necromantic ritual, a betrayal of the highest order. He prepared to execute the traitor. But then, the girl didn't rip the heart out. She pulsed. A sound like a choir of glass instruments shattered the silence of the woods, a high-pitched resonance that vibrated in Elijah's teeth. A shockwave of golden light exploded from her small, trembling hands, forcing Elijah to shield his eyes. When the light faded, the blood didn't wash away, it reversed. The flesh knit together. The shattered ribs snapped back into alignment with sickening crunches that sounded like wet celery being broken and reassembled. The wolf on the ground gasped, life flooding back into his lungs with a wet rattle. But the girl? The girl fell back as if she'd been shot by a sniper. Elijah froze. He wasn't looking at a traitor. He was looking at a battery. And judging by the way her skin turned the color of bruised ash and her veins darkened to charcoal, the battery was running on empty. 12 hours earlier. The Silver Peak pack hall smelled of roasted venison, unwashed bodies, and the distinct, metallic tang of aggressive testosterone. It was the monthly pack gathering, an event King Elijah loathed with the intensity of 1,000 burning suns. Elijah sat on his obsidian throne, a chair that was uncomfortable by design. Comfort made a king soft, or so his father had claimed. At 6'5", Elijah was an architectural marvel of muscle and bad temper. He was known as the Granite King, mostly because his emotional range went from stoic rock to falling boulder. He swirled the wine in his goblet, staring at the chaotic sea of his subjects. They were loud. They were drunk. They were happy. He hated it. The reports from the southern border are concerning, Silas, his beta, murmured, leaning in close. Silas was a good wolf, but he had the nervous energy of a squirrel that had accidentally ingested an espresso shot. More rogues. And the scouts say the flowers are wilting near the Omega quarters again. They think it's the curse. Elijah suppressed an eye roll so hard it nearly hurt. Silas, flowers wilt because it is November. It is not a curse. It is seasons. Do I need to explain the tilt of the Earth's axis to the elders again? Or should I just ban gardening? It's her, Elijah, Silas insisted, gesturing vaguely toward the far corner of the hall, near the drafty servant's entrance. The mute. Sarah. Elijah's gaze drifted to the far corner. There she was. Sarah. The ghost of Silver Peak. In a room full of boisterous, brawling shifters, Sarah was a void. She wore oversized gray tunics that swallowed her slight frame, and her hair was a messy curtain of brown that permanently obscured her face. She was an Omega, the lowest of the low, tasked with scrubbing floors and mending tunics. She had no scent. That was the most disturbing part. Every wolf had a scent: pine, rain, blood, musk. Sarah smelled like static. Like the air right before a lightning strike. It made the hair on Elijah's arms stand up, a biological warning he had ignored for years. She's staring at her shoes again, Silas whispered, shuddering. It's unnatural. She doesn't submit, she doesn't cower. She just exists. It's like having a piece of furniture that judges you. She was rejected by her mate, Elijah said dismissively, taking a sip of wine. It breaks the mind sometimes. You rejected her, Silas pointed out, brave or stupid enough to bring it up. Elijah stiffened, the wine glass cracking slightly in his grip. I rejected the bond. There is a difference. When I took the throne, I needed a queen with claws, Silas. I needed a warrior who could lead armies, not a mute mouse who looks like a strong wind would scatter her across 3 counties. I did her a favor. The court would have eaten her alive. Perhaps, Silas mused. But she's been slipping out at night. Every night. Past the perimeter. Elijah frowned. Past the perimeter? That's suicide. The rogues patrol those woods. At that moment, the great oak doors of the hall banged open. A group of hunters entered, carrying a stretcher. The smell of death hit Elijah instantly, acrid and undeniable. Silver Claw Trap, one of the hunters shouted, his voice cracking with panic. It's Beta Vance. He's gutted. The rogues set a trap near the river. The hall erupted into chaos. Healers rushed forward, but Elijah could see from the throne that it was hopeless. Vance's chest was a ruin. The damage was catastrophic. As the commotion grew, Elijah's sharp eyes caught a movement in the corner. Sarah had stood up. She wasn't looking at the dying man with horror like the others. She was looking at him with a strange, terrifying focus. Her hazel eyes, usually dull, flashed with something bright. Then, she turned and slipped out the side door, into the biting cold of the night. Where is she going? Silas asked. Vance is dying right here, and she's leaving? Handle the wounded, Elijah commanded, standing up. The movement silenced the room instantly. I have security matters to attend to. He didn't know why he followed her. Perhaps it was the boredom. Perhaps it was the nagging feeling that Silas was right, and she was up to something nefarious. Or perhaps it was the fact that for 3 years, every time he closed his eyes, he saw the look on her face the day he rejected her, not sadness, but a pity so profound it made him want to punch a wall. He tracked her easily. She moved silently, but Elijah was the Alpha King. He could track a snowflake in a blizzard. He followed her past the perimeter, past the safety of the guards, deep into the forbidden woods known as the Valley of the Fallen. This was where wolves went to die when they were too ashamed to do it in bed. What are you doing, little ghost? Elijah muttered to himself, blending into the shadows of a massive pine tree. She stopped in a clearing. To Elijah's shock, she wasn't alone. Lying on the ground, having evidently dragged himself there to die in peace rather than burden the pack, was Beta Vance. The body in the hall must have been a diversion, or perhaps Vance had crawled away before the healers could secure him. Sarah knelt beside the mangled body. Don't do it, Elijah whispered, his hand on his dagger. Don't you dare finish him off. But she didn't strike. She opened her hands. And that was when the world changed. Chapter 2. The Crimson Meadow. The light was blinding, but the sound was worse. It was a hum that vibrated in Elijah's teeth, a resonance that felt like the earth itself was singing in pain. It was the sound of natural laws being broken. From his vantage point, Elijah watched the impossible. Sarah's hands were pressed into the ruin of Vance's chest. The Alpha King knew anatomy. Vance's heart should have been shreds. His lungs should have been soup. But under the golden glow of the Omega's hands, bones sparked and grew. Muscle fibers wove together like a high-speed loom. But the miracle came with a price tag Elijah couldn't comprehend. For every inch of flesh that knit together on the wolf, a crack appeared in Sarah. It started at her fingertips. The healthy, tan skin turned a translucent, sickly gray. Veins that should have been blue turned ink black, shooting up her arms like poison ivy spreading in time-lapse. She arched her back, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled back, revealing whites that glowed with a terrifying inner luminescence. Elijah realized with a jolt of horror that she wasn't healing him in the traditional sense. She wasn't channeling energy from the earth or the moon. She was taking it. She was siphoning the trauma, the tissue damage, the blood loss, and pulling it into her own body to metabolize it. Stop. The roar tore out of Elijah's throat before his brain authorized it. He broke cover, sprinting across the frozen clearing, kicking up snow as he ran. Sarah's head snapped up. Her eyes, usually a dull hazel, were glowing with a terrifying, celestial white light. She looked at him, and for a second, Elijah felt small. He felt like a child interrupting a god at work. "Let go," she rasped. It was a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "You're killing yourself," Elijah shouted, reaching for her. "Break the link." "He has cubs," she whispered. With one final, violent surge of energy, she pushed the last of the magic into the beta. Vance inhaled sharply, his eyes flying open, his chest heaving with whole, healthy lungs. He looked around wildly, confused by the sudden rush of air. Simultaneously, Sarah collapsed. The connection broke. Elijah slid on his knees, catching her before her head struck a jagged rock. The momentum skidded them both through the snow. He looked down at the ghost. She looked like a corpse that hadn't been informed it was dead yet. Her lips were blue. Her skin was ice cold, and the black veins had reached her neck, pulsing with a dark, rhythmic ugliness. It looked like ink moving under her skin. "Vance." Elijah barked at the bewildered beta who was sitting up, checking his own chest in disbelief. "King Elijah?" Vance stammered, touching his chest where a gaping hole had been seconds ago. I was dead. I swear I was dead. I saw the ancestors. They told me to get a haircut." "You're alive, you idiot," Elijah snarled. "Because she just traded her life for yours. Move. Run back to the pack house. Get Martha. Tell her to prep the trauma ward. If you stop to sniff a tree, I will kill you myself." Vance scrambled up, turned into his wolf form, a massive russet beast, and bolted toward the castle. Elijah turned his attention back to Sarah. She was shivering violently, her teeth chattering so hard he worried they would crack. He ripped off his heavy fur cloak, lined with bear pelt, and wrapped it around her. "Why?" Elijah demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and fear. "Why would you do this? You owe this pack nothing. We treat you like garbage. We ignore you. I ignored you." Sarah's eyes fluttered open. The white glow was fading, leaving them glassy and unfocused. She looked up at the king, the man who had told her she was worthless 3 years ago. Slowly, painfully, she reached a hand out from the cloak. Her fingers were stained with Vance's blood and her own black corruption. She touched the scar on Elijah's cheek, a jagged line he'd received in the Great War. "Pain," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind, "does not belong to the good." "I am not good," Elijah growled, his voice cracking. "And neither was he. He was a fool who walked into a trap. That is natural selection, Sarah. This," he gestured to her ruined arms, "this is suicide." She smiled. It was a sad, broken thing that broke Elijah's heart in ways he didn't know were possible. "The pack needs soldiers, not ghosts." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp. Elijah scooped her up. She weighed nothing. It was like holding a bundle of dry sticks and wet clothes. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced the granite of his heart. He had faced armies. He had faced demons. He had never been afraid. But as he looked at the black veins creeping toward her heart, Elijah felt a terror so pure it nearly brought him to his knees. "You are not dying on me," he hissed, sprinting into the woods, moving faster than he had ever moved in his life. "I am the king, and I forbid you to die." Chapter 3: A Crown of Thorns. The king's private chambers were forbidden to everyone except Silas and the cleaning staff. Even the cleaners were terrified to enter, fearing they might disturb the king's brooding. It was a sanctuary of stone, fur, and silence. So, when Elijah kicked the door open, carrying a muddy, bloody, unconscious Omega, and laid her gently on his massive four-poster bed, the castle staff in the hallway nearly fainted. "Martha!" Elijah roared, his voice shaking the stone walls and rattling the chandeliers. Martha hobbled in 3 seconds later. She was the pack's oldest healer, a woman who looked like a dehydrated apple and possessed the bedside manner of a disgruntled badger. She had birthed Elijah, and she was the only person in the world allowed to smack him. Stop shouting, you giant oaf. I'm not deaf, Martha snapped, carrying a bag of rattling herbs. She froze when she saw the bed. Well, that's a lot of blood for a Tuesday. Did you finally kill Silas? Fix her, Elijah ordered, pacing the room like a caged tiger. She healed Vance. She took his injury. Now she's turning black. Martha's sarcasm vanished instantly. She moved to the bed with surprising speed, peeling back the fur cloak. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Get out, Martha said, her voice trembling. No. Elijah, I need to strip her and check the extent of the necrosis. Turn around or get out. Elijah turned around, staring into the fireplace, his knuckles white as he gripped the stone mantel. The fire crackled, mocking the cold dread in his stomach. What is it, Martha? Is it a curse? Silas said she was cursed. Silas is a moron who thinks thunder is the sky's stomach rumbling, Martha muttered, the sound of tearing fabric filling the room. You can look now. Elijah turned back. Sarah was covered in a sheet up to her neck, but Martha had exposed one of her arms and her upper chest. The black veins had stopped spreading, but they were pulsing. They formed a distinct, jagged pattern over her heart, a circle of spikes. This isn't a curse, Elijah, Martha said softly, her old eyes filled with a mixture of awe and horror. This is the coronam spinae, the crown of thorns. Elijah frowned. I don't speak ancient pretentious, Martha. Use your words. It's a biological failsafe, Martha explained, wiping Sarah's sweating forehead with a damp cloth infused with lavender. It only exists in the bloodline of the first alphas. The original bloodline. Before the packs were divided by war. Sarah is a scavenger's daughter, Elijah scoffed. She has no royal blood. Her parents were nobodies. She does now, Martha said, looking Elijah dead in the eye. The spell is dormant in Omegas who are fated mates to true kings. It activates only under one specific condition. The room went silent. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. What condition? Elijah asked, his voice low. Rejection, Martha whispered. Total, soul-breaking rejection by their fated mate without the bond being severed. When the king rejects his queen, the universe tries to correct the imbalance. Elijah felt the blood drain from his face. Since you refused to protect her, Martha continued mercilessly, her biology rewrote itself to protect you and your pack. She became a shield. She absorbs the damage meant for the pack because her soul thinks that if she keeps your kingdom safe, maybe, just maybe, you'll finally want her. Elijah staggered back, hitting the wall. The revelation hit him harder than any physical blow. I did this, he whispered. You called her nothing, Martha said, applying a poultice to the black veins. You told her she was weak. So she became the strongest thing in this entire kingdom. She has been healing your soldiers for 3 years, Elijah. Why do you think our casualty rate is so low? Why do you think Vance survived? She is slowly killing herself to buy you glory. Elijah looked at the girl in the bed. The ghost. The mute. She hadn't been silent because she had nothing to say. She had been silent because she was too busy dying for him. Every victory he had celebrated, every soldier who had miraculously recovered, it was all paid for by the girl he had discarded. He walked to the bed and fell to his knees. He took her cold hand in his. The static shock he had felt earlier wasn't repulsion, it was recognition. His wolf had known. His wolf had known for 3 years, and Elijah, in his arrogance, had choked it into silence. I can fix this, Elijah said, his voice fierce. I accept her. I accept the bond. Sarah, I accept you. Nothing happened. The black veins didn't recede. It's not that simple, you dense cabbage, Martha sighed, though her eyes were wet. She has to accept you. And right now, she's in a coma induced by dark magic. And frankly, why would she accept you? You're emotionally constipated and you have a terrible temper. I can change, Elijah said, desperate. I'll be delightful. I'll be charming. I'll stop threatening to execute people for chewing too loudly. We might not get the chance, Martha said grimly, looking toward the window. Outside, the first bell began to toll. It wasn't the dinner bell. It was a frantic, rhythmic bronze scream that meant only one thing. Invasion. Chapter 4. the bronze scream. The door burst open again. It was Silas, looking pale and decidedly less squirrel-like. He was covered in soot, and his sword was drawn. "Rogues!" Silas yelled, forgetting all protocol. "And not just a raiding party. It's the Bloodtooth clan. Thousands of them. They've breached the southern wall. They're inside the perimeter." Elijah stood up, the mask of the king sliding back into place. "Rally the elite guard. Secure the infirmary. I want the civilians in the bunkers." "We need you at the front, Elijah," Silas said urgently. "They brought a siege beast. It's a genetic abomination, 10 feet tall. It's tearing through the lines like wet paper." Elijah looked down at Sarah. She was defenseless. "If the rogues reached the keep..." As if hearing the chaos, Sarah gasped. Her eyes flew open. She sat up, clutching her chest, the sheet falling away to reveal the black web over her heart. It was pulsing faster now, reacting to the pain of the pack. "They are dying," she whispered. Her voice was stronger now, panic lacing every syllable. She swung her legs out of bed, her knees buckling immediately. "No," Elijah barked, stepping in front of her. "You are not going anywhere." "I have to," Sarah cried, trying to push past him. She was incredibly weak, stumbling into his chest. "I can feel them, Elijah. I can feel their pain. It's too loud. I have to take it away." "You will take nothing away." Elijah grabbed her shoulders, shaking her gently. "Look at you. You are made of glass right now. If you heal one more scratch, you will shatter. The crown of thorns has almost reached your heart." "I don't care," Sarah screamed, the first time she had ever raised her voice. It was a raw, guttural sound. "I am nothing. You said so yourself. You said I was a blank page. If I can save the pack, then my life has meaning. Let me go." The words hit Elijah harder than any siege beast could. They were his own words, weaponized against him. "You are not nothing," Elijah growled, pulling her close, pinning her against his chest armor. "You are everything. You are the queen. And I forbid you from spending your life like currency." "The pack will die," she sobbed into his tunic, her tears hot against the cold metal of his armor. "Then let them die." The silence that followed was deafening. Silas, standing in the doorway, dropped his sword. It clattered loudly on the stone. Martha gasped. Elijah looked down at Sarah, his eyes burning with gold fire. "I have spent my life protecting this pack," Elijah said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "I have bled for them. I have killed for them. I have sacrificed my happiness for them. But if the price of this kingdom is your heartbeats, then let it burn to ash. I am not choosing the pack anymore, Sarah. I am choosing the woman who was too kind to tell me I was a fool." "Elijah," she whispered, looking up at him, her eyes wide. The black veins on her neck seemed to pause. "I won't let you do this alone," he said. He dropped to one knee. He, the alpha of alphas, the granite king, lowered his head before the omega he had scorned. He pulled the collar of his armor aside, baring the junction of his neck and shoulder, the most vulnerable spot on a wolf. "Take it," he commanded. Sarah froze. "What?" "Bond with me," Elijah said. "The magic is draining you because you are a finite vessel. You are a cup trying to hold an ocean. But I am the Alpha King. I have power to spare. Bite me, Sarah. Complete the bond. Siphon from me, not yourself. Use my life force to heal them." "It could kill you," she whispered. "The feedback loop, if I pull too hard. I'd rather die with you than live as the king of a graveyard." He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "Please, Sarah. Claim me." The sounds of battle were getting closer. Screams echoed in the hallway. The smell of smoke was drifting under the door. Sarah looked at the man kneeling before her. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. For the first time, she didn't see the king who hated her. She saw the man who needed her. She cupped his face with her trembling, blackened hands. "You're an idiot," she whispered fondly. "I know," Elijah grinned, a sharp, dangerous expression. "But I'm your idiot." Sarah leaned down. Her canines extended, sharp and white. With a guttural growl, she sank her teeth into the mark on his neck. Chapter 5, 2 Souls, 1 War. The moment her teeth pierced his skin, the room exploded. It wasn't just light this time. It was a physical force, a shockwave of pure, unadulterated power that blew the windows out of their frames. Silas was thrown backwards into the hallway, sliding 10 feet. Martha ducked behind a heavy oak dresser as books, candles, and furniture were swept up in a hurricane of gold and obsidian energy. Elijah roared, his back arching. He didn't feel pain. He felt like he had just been plugged into the heart of a star. He felt Sarah's soul slam into his, not a soft merge, but a collision of galaxies. He felt her years of loneliness, her silence, her desperate need to be useful. And she felt him. She felt his regret, his adoration, and his rage. The black veins on Sarah's skin ignited. They didn't disappear. They turned into glowing lines of molten gold. Her eyes turned entirely silver. Elijah stood up, pulling Sarah with him. They didn't look like two people anymore. They looked like a binary star system. "How do you feel?" Elijah asked, his voice sounding strange, like two voices layered together, a harmonic distortion. Sarah looked at her hands. They were crackling with energy. She looked at Elijah and smiled, a smile that promised violence. "I feel," she said, "like we should go introduce ourselves." The courtyard. The battle was lost. The Bloodtooth rogues had overrun the courtyard. The siege beast, a mutated beowulf hybrid the size of a minivan with rusted metal plates bolted to its skin, was currently battering down the inner sanctuary doors. The Silver Peak warriors were broken, bleeding, and surrounded. "Surrender," the rogue Alpha screamed, standing atop a pile of rubble. He was a massive brute covered in scars. "Your king is hiding. Your pack is finished." Boom. The main keep doors didn't just open, they disintegrated. Splinters of wood became shrapnel, taking out the front line of rogues. From the dust emerged King Elijah. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, hand in hand, was the quiet Omega. They were glowing. Literally. A faint aura of golden distortion warped the air around them. Actually, Elijah called out, his voice amplified by magic so it boomed across the valley. The king was just apologizing to his wife. It took a moment. "He's very stubborn." The rogue Alpha laughed. "You bring a girl to fight? A mute? What is she going to do, bleed on me?" Sarah stepped forward. She didn't speak. She just raised her hand. The air pressure dropped. The siege beast roared and charged at her, the ground shaking with every step. Elijah didn't move. He just watched, a smirk playing on his lips. Sarah flicked her wrist. Vines of solid light, manifestations of the crown of thorns, erupted from the cobblestones. They wrapped around the siege beast, lifting the massive creature into the air like a toy. The beast roared, thrashing, but the light burned into its flesh. Sarah closed her fist. The vines tightened. The beast didn't even have time to squeal before it was crushed into silence, dropping to the ground as a heap of broken bones. The battlefield went dead quiet. "She's not a mute," Elijah clarified, drawing his sword, which was now glowing with the same golden fire as Sarah's skin. "She just prefers to let her actions do the talking. Now, get off my lawn." The battle that followed was less of a fight and more of a theological debate between people with swords and angry gods. Every time a Silver Peak warrior fell, Sarah would pulse with light, siphoning energy from Elijah. Elijah, fueled by the bond, fought with the strength of 10 alphas. He was a blur of steel and violence, protecting her while she acted as a mobile regeneration unit. At one point, Silas, who was fighting near them, got stabbed in the leg by a rogue spear. "Ow!" Son of a Silas yelped. Sarah glanced at him. The wound sealed instantly. "Thanks," Silas shouted, barely missing a beat. "Hey, about the horse trade. Focus, Silas." Elijah roared, decapitating a rogue with a backhanded swing. "We discuss your poor bargaining skills later." The rogues broke. They couldn't fight an army that wouldn't stay down. They turned and fled, scrambling over the walls, chased by the terrifying laughter of a king and queen who were high on adrenaline and ancient magic. The aftermath, the new dawn. The sun rose over a battered but victorious Silver Peak. The snow was melted and the walls were cracked, but the pack was alive. In the center of the courtyard, Elijah sat on a crate of supplies, wiping rogue blood off his sword. Sarah sat next to him, leaning her head on his shoulder. She was exhausted, but she was no longer fading. The bond hummed between them, a steady, infinite loop of give and take. The pack members stood in a wide circle, staring at them. They looked at Sarah not with contempt, but with something bordering on religious terror. So Silas said, limping up to them, "That went well. We need to rebuild the gate," Elijah noted, surveying the damage. "And the wall," Sarah added. Her voice was raspy but clear. The pack gasped. She spoke. "And," Sarah continued, looking at Silas with a sharp glint in her eye, "we need to discuss the fact that my husband's beta tried to trade me for livestock last week." Silas paled. "It was a really nice horse, Your Highness. A stallion. Very shiny. Great mane." "Run, Silas," Elijah advised, leaning back and closing his eyes, a content smile on his face. 5-second head start, Sarah added, holding up her glowing hand. Silas sprinted faster than he had during the battle. Elijah chuckled, pulling Sarah closer. "I think I like this new dynamic." "Me too," Sarah murmured, closing her eyes. "But Elijah?" "Yes, my queen. If you ever call me mute again, I'm going to use the crown of thorns to knit your shoelaces together while you're walking." "Understood." Elijah kissed the top of her head. "Rest now. We have a kingdom to rule tomorrow." And for the first time in the history of Silver Peak, the Alpha King didn't look like granite. He looked like a man who had finally found his heart, and it was beating in the chest of the woman beside him.
If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. And you don't want to miss it.